A recent report by Horizon Advisory says China is poised to win the global revolution in electric vehicles. The report highlights the fact that China leads across the value chain from critical mineral imports and battery production to vehicle manufacturing and even EV brands. It noted that China has developed its advantages in global supply of critical mineral imports such as lithium, which is used for making EV batteries. The country also has an advantage in market demand. So for more on this, joined us on the line now is Charles Liu, co-founder and former chairman of Hao Capital. So first of all, Horizon Advisory's report said China is poised to win the global EV revolution as it leads across the value chain. So Charles, what's your view and how would you describe the value chain of China's EV sector?
Like many other value chains or supply chains in China, it is the only complete supply chain or value chain in the world without having to depend on other sources or channels of components and supplies. Of course, it may be efficient to buy some parts from other countries, but the biggest thing for China is that it has a complete supply chain, unlike most other countries.
And what is China's EV battery production capacity? We know that the company CATL claimed a global market share of 28% in the year 2019, while BYD took 9%. So will they continue to be leaders in the battery production?
I think they will continue to be leaders in the battery production competition. But also, don't forget, these are 2019 numbers. The latest numbers are even higher in terms of their share. Also, very significant is major battery manufacturers from Korea, for example, and from Japan also have a significant portion of their output manufactured in China. So the Chinese total EV battery production capacity is actually nearly half of the total in the world.
And China is the world's largest EV market. China is also competing for the global EV brands. Of the top 12 global EV automakers by fundraising, 7 are Chinese, including NIO, Xiaopeng, Li Auto, and Byton. So how would you assess those Chinese EV makers compared with their international competitors? What are their advantages and disadvantages?
In terms of the advantages, is that actually all electric vehicle companies are starting pretty much at the same starting point, because this is all new and it's all from the last few years. Of course, we hear some big names, new ones, which are beginning to really make inroads into the market. But the real big advantage is they don't have any legacy systems to have to operate, because it's always more expensive to renovate or rebuild legacy systems or to reform legacy systems to fit the new product than to build from new. And most automakers in the world have very large fossil fuel facilities in which they have paid billions and billions and billions to build. And I don't think they're in a position to think about writing everything off now. So they would have to continue to renovate or rebuild their old systems.
And since it's a big market, the world's major auto companies have also increased investment in China. For example, General Motors plan to continue to invest in China at a rate of $1 billion per year. So what's the competitiveness of the world's major automakers like GM?
Well, I think this is exactly my point on the GM, companies like GM. They can continue to invest in China at a rate of $1 billion per year, but I don't think all of that is, or even most of that, is going to go to electric vehicles, because they have a major fossil fuel manufacturing facility in Shanghai that they need to continue to run. They sell more cars in China than in the United States, and it's basically non-electric. So I think they may have some branding advantages, But compared to Chinese EV startups, I think China will have a good starting point to compete with them.
Over the past few years, we've seen a lot of tech giants and internet companies betting on the EV and smart vehicles. Apple is only one example. So how do you view those tech companies' ambition in the EV sector? What makes those tech company outsiders so keen on building electric vehicles?
I think unlike fossil fuel vehicles in which the engine is the core, electric vehicles, the engine is not the core. It's all the electronics. It's all the battery management systems. It's all the things which the tech companies do a lot better than the car companies in, that make them believe, and I think rightly so, that they have definitely the competitive advantage over the traditional auto manufacturers.
Mm-hmm. And what do you make of the enthusiasm surrounding the investment in EVs?
Well, it's just like if you bet on Ford 100 years ago, you would have been very happy. And I think people are looking to see which one will win out in the competition, in the battle for market share over the course of next 10 years.
Mm-hmm. And what do you expect from the development of the EV industry in China? Because some business insider perceive the EV revolution as a big opportunity for China to build strong domestic auto brands that can dominate the home market and compete globally. So what's your take?
Oh, I believe that's absolutely true. Without having had if we didn't have the political attacks by the U.S., Huawei will be the biggest cell phone manufacturer in the world by now. I think similar things can happen in China because the Chinese market size creates efficiencies of scale that no one else can have. China, more than half of electric vehicles worldwide sold and manufactured last year was in China worldwide. So I think the efficiency that comes from scale, the drive to invest in better technology, and the support by the government will allow the Chinese EV manufacturers to have a very strong position internationally.
Mm-hmm. And over the past year, during the pandemic, the volume of e-vehicle sales increased significantly in China and in Europe. But President Joe Biden said the U.S. must ramp up production of EVs to catch up with and then surpass China. So what's your take? Will the U.S. create an industrial policy to support it, or what will the competition be like in the future?
President Biden is not only talking about electric vehicles, he's talking about a package of over $1 trillion in total, I think, in chips, in artificial intelligence, in other things. But I don't think businessmen think the same way because, again, supply chain. Most major components of automobiles in the U.S. today are actually not made in the U.S. To move everything back to manufacturing in the U.S., it's going to be very, very costly. And ultimately, it's a question of how much profit are you willing to give up to bring your production onshore. Most components are made all over the world now and assembled in the U.S. or in Mexico and Canada and then shipped to the U.S. Now, electric vehicles, most of the components, China, I think almost all the components, really, China can make itself now. So it has not only been able to make it, but it has the capacity, the manufacturing capacity to ramp up very quickly. So industrial policy from the U.S., I think it's really for their midterm elections more than reality.